Hello, everyone. Welcome to Cave of the Cross Apologetics. I'm Patrick.
I'm Tony.
And we're on the second to last chapter for Greg Koukl's book.
This is the penultimate chapter.
Ultimate. That's fancy. Fancy word.
Yeah.
So we're on chapter 18, mini tactics. And so this is the rapid fire little things that are important. And there's a lot to cover here. And so we're kind of moving still within the how to respond to people, but this is kind of a mixture of both kind of how to respond to people, but also how flaws are found.
Yeah,
and so that's what we've kind of been looking at previously, and then one more chapter and we're done, and then we might have something afterwards.
Yeah.
So we start off here with one of the mini tactics is what a friend we have in Jesus. Which,
And so actually he gives us 5 of these, right?
5 total, right? So he talks about, he says here, he's developed a handful of modest maneuvers that may help you, like they've helped me in conversation with others. And he calls them mini tactics, right? Because the concepts are relatively uncomplicated and be put into play easily when needed. So it's, again, and throughout this, we haven't really found a if A then B, how to respond. You kind of just this is how a conversation goes, and so these ones are not so much like Columbo tactics where they're kind of the main crux. So he has what a friend we have in Jesus, which will be the first one. Sticks and stones, moving towards the objection. Watch your language, always good, and the power of so. Yeah. So the first one here is kind of this general principle of a tactic, and it's to pit the challenger, whoever you're talking to, against Jesus whenever you can.
Wow.
Kind of makes
so
sense.
They go up against Jesus.
You know?
My goodness.
Who wants to do that?
Yeah.
So he says, kind of step aside whenever you can and let Jesus shoulder the responsibility for his own claims. It really helps balance the scales. And so I kind of think about this as when people critique presuppositional apologetics, say, oh, you're starting with the conclusion. Well, my conclusion makes me, present the argument of the gospel and that Christianity is true. And without the biblical Christian God, I can't know anything. I know things. Therefore, that's my ultimate standard.
Right.
So this is just an offshoot of that, and saying, I believe Jesus is God. He knows the answers. I'm presenting them. So when Jesus talks about these things in particular, let him talk.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Really.
You might not like it, but that's the worldview I'm presenting.
Yeah.
The
Plus,
person.
You're a Christian, right? He's our source of authority.
Heaven forbid the Christian talks about Jesus. And so we have this kind of main example that he brings up about a friend wanting Greg Koukl's opinion on the safest way to answer the question, what do you think about same-sex marriage?
Yeah, apparently his daughter, the friend's daughter, was going to have to maybe answer a question or give a presentation or something like that, right? Yeah.
So he suggested this. What a friend we have with Jesus, and so how can we answer this kind of odd question in this day and age when you're supposed to be very PC and you're just supposed to let everyone do what's right in their own eyes, and if as long as it's not hurting you, then it shouldn't affect you. Yeah. So how do we present the truth of what Jesus says with what's faux pas out in the world?
Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, we are Christians, and so we should present what Jesus says. Yeah. And so he says that the response that he thinks satisfies both requirements is to say, since I'm a follower of Christ, my view on marriage is the same as Jesus and his view. One he made clear in Matthew 19. I'll sum it up this way. Jesus' view was one man, one woman, becoming one flesh for one lifetime. So on the definition of marriage, I stand with Jesus. Now there's more that you can unpack about what constitutes proper divorce or abuse and all the things that go around it. But essentially, Jesus does speak on this.
Yeah,
and, no matter what people like Matthew Vine and other people that try and say, Christianity makes allowances for monogamous homosexual relationships, that just doesn't seem to be the case from Jesus' point of view.
Right.
So you either have to say that Jesus doesn't know what he's talking about. He never, in his being fully God and fully man, he never envisioned what a monogamous homosexual relationship was. He never knew what the year 2010 or 2020 or 2099 looked like. And so you have to then disagree with Jesus. And so depending on who you're talking to, this is definitely a formidable response.
Yeah, good. Yeah, so one man, one woman for one flesh for one lifetime, right? That's what Jesus held to in Matthew 18. So that's what marriage was for Jesus. And so, there we have an answer, and it's not our answer. This is what Jesus says. So if you have a problem with it, you need to fight with him, right?
So Jesus comments in Matthew 19 here may also be help you with a similar appeal to Jesus' authority. Well, Jesus never said anything about homosexuality.
Yeah, he never said anything about that.
He doesn't specifically say, now, concerning homosexuality, this is what I decree.
Right.
Notice this is an attempt to use the "what a friend we have in Jesus" tactic against the Christian.
Ooh, okay,
Jesus never said this, so you
yeah.
can never talk about this because he never said anything.
Right. So he has a friend in Jesus, right? In terms of Jesus never said it there. Jesus is my friend.
Right. So if Jesus didn't specifically condemn homosexuality or same-sex marriage or gender dysmorphia, how can Christians condemn it? That's the thinking. That's the response.
Right.
So what can we properly conclude from the record's apparent silence about Jesus viewing homosexuality?
The argument from silence, right?
Well, the answer is simple. What can we conclude? Nothing. Right. Not much. Now, there are better arguments for silence, and why doesn't Jesus talk about the use of tanks during World War II? Okay, you got me there.
Yeah.
And so there are three issues at play here, and he says the first is that there's a difference between the record being silent about Jesus' opinion on something and Jesus being silent about it. And we have to remember what kind of the Gospel of John tells us. Jesus said a lot of things that aren't recorded in the Gospels, but John recorded the things so that we may believe. So it's offering us a way to know things. He providing.
So there was a purpose for why they gave us what the Gospels, each Gospel, why they gave us what they gave us. Right. And John specifically spells out his purpose. Right.
Maybe he did tell John, there's going to be this time during the 1940s where tanks will be used.
Yeah.
So
we just didn't hear about that.
Yeah. The hidden mysteries of Jesus on the History Channel, if the History Channel does any history anymore. So that's the first one. The second is the apparent silent significance. And think about it. The record is also silent on Jesus' view of slavery, capital punishment, spousal abuse, sex trafficking, racism, child abuse, gay bashing, to name a few.
Oh, so he's silent on these. I guess it's okay to do those, right?
And we hear about this one a lot when we talk about abortion. Oh, why is Christians against it? Jesus never talked about abortion.
Right. Jesus never talked about.
You're absolutely right.
Child abuse.
Jesus would be completely fine with child abuse and child murder. That's the inference.
Spousal abuse, of course. He never talked about that. So,
that's what submission means. That's what I take it out of context to mean. So do we infer from the silence that he approves of these things? Well, hardly, right? Believe it or not, the Bible isn't a set of rules come down from on high on golden plates, and they tell us, input this action, output this response. It's not like that. It's presenting ideas and forms and different general principles that we apply, and that's what the New Testament authors do with the Old Testament. That's what New Testament authors do with themselves. That's what the church fathers did with early church fathers did with the Bible. So that's the response to it. Just because Jesus is silent doesn't mean that we don't have general principles that we can also apply to it.
Right. Good. Yeah.
And so the kind of the third part here is it's difficult to conclude anything about what Jesus did not condemn, right? But sometimes we can infer Jesus' view on something we have no record of by listening carefully to his view on a related thing he did weigh in.
Right, so we can make an inference based on what he said about those specific things.
Right. Yeah. Jesus in Matthew 19 says, have you not read? He that made them in the beginning made them male and female. He's talking about marriage. He's talking about the normal operation, the natural way that God created human beings to interact with each other, and on what basis. And yes, there were perversions to it. There were people that we deem as patriarchs and good godly people, and they went off and had more concubines than you could shake a stick at.
Right.
And so there's the operational, but there's also the ideology that surrounds that. And so Jesus does actually speak about it because he limits the scope of what marriage is. Mm-hmm. Why didn't Jesus say, well, one man and one woman and another one and another one and a dog and then a tree?
Yeah.
It's because he does limit it. He has spoken about this. He doesn't specifically say in kind of this Western context, and that's how we kind of view things. Is we need a list. We need a list of provisions, and we need a list of negations. So that's what we want as a Western thinking reader. We want them to say, Thomas exclaims, "My Lord and my God." And what I mean by that is you are ontologically the same as the Father and the Spirit. Right. And so you want Thomas to expand on this, but it's like, well, I'm sorry. That's
not the way it works.
Yeah, right? You're not getting that. I'm sorry. It'd be nice, but no one had video cameras back then. We don't have people signing copies and sending them out and stuff like that. So here, considering Matthew 19, it turns out Jesus had strong convictions about sexual subjects. According to him, the only kind of sexuality, one flesh, that's proper is sex between man and woman in a lifelong committed marital relationships with each other. So what is Jesus' view on online pornography? Well, he does talk about that in the sense that he made specific statements about what a proper relationship with sex and a person is. Mm-hmm. So we get that from Matthew 19. Conversely, all forms of sex explicitly prohibited in the Bible, adultery, fornication, homosexuality, bestialities, and are each automatically disqualified by Jesus' reasoning. His one simple principle rules them all out. So that's what we're saying. So he makes a positive statement, and from there we inference what's out as well.
Wow, what a friend we have in Jesus.
It's almost the Christian thing to do. And so it appears that Jesus has a lot to say indirectly about the issue of homosexuality and same-sex marriage and gender dysmorphia and all those various hot-button issues, giving puberty blockers to children, what have you, whatever the next hot-button issue is. The Bible does talk about it, and we just have to do the hard work. So take advantage of any opportunity you have to get Jesus on your side. Let him do the arguing for you. Yeah. You're a Christian.
Right.
Use it.
Right.
People may not like it. People say, well, I don't care what your magic sky fairy says, but it's part of your worldview that you're presenting as an answer. Yeah. So, if they're like, oh, that's just mythological tales. Well, that's just your opinion. I don't really agree with that. I mean, we can just go back and forth if we're just going to, cut everyone's knees out from what their worldview is right. Allowing them to argue from. And so you may have to set this up in advance by asking, what's your opinion on Jesus, right? Figure out where that person's coming from, and you get a whole range of issues like he's a great teacher, he's an important prophet, he's this guru, he's this archetype of the perfect man of who we're supposed to be, that Jordan Peterson type deal. He's a Christ of some sort, but not the Christ. So you figure out where they view Jesus.
So if they have a positive image of Jesus and in terms of him being authoritative and that sort of thing, all right, now you can go with what a friend we have in Jesus, right. Because they've kind of legitimized who Jesus is and what he's done and what he stands for. Right. And so now you can use this one, and it's pretty tough for them to back out of it. Right.
and too, we talk about this as a type of evidence. Is authority a type of evidence? Yes, if it's a proper authority. Right. And so if Jesus is the one that creates those things and implemented the idea of marriage and what that is, isn't it proper to bring up, who we agree that started the whole thing? Right. Yeah. That's a way. And so I think too with liberal Christians, if you're on the other side, figuring out where they stand on Jesus is kind of sadly a thing to do now. Well, he's fine, but we read other gurus and stuff like that. So we just don't want to pigeonhole everyone, and not everyone can find the way, the truth, and the life.
So this is a good one. What a friend we have in Jesus, right? It allows us now to speak to these issues, and the person now has to interact with Christ. Actually, so it's good because we have an authoritative voice in Jesus, and it's pretty difficult for them to 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 refute or at least go against that, especially if they initially think that Jesus is a guru or a good teacher and that sort of thing. But it's good because it can get us into the scriptures. Right?
Yeah.
Let's see what Jesus said about that. Right.
And I think it's important too, especially if they come at you with, well, Jesus never said those things. Oh, we care about what Jesus says now. Yeah. Well, let's go. Let's see what Jesus has to say about things. Yeah. And so they either have to back out and say, well, I was just using your, worldview against you. Oh, that doesn't seem to have worked for you. Or, I care what Jesus says because I think he's a good teacher. Well, if you think he's so good, don't you view some benefit of having a monogamous one man, one woman for life?
Yeah, that's because that's what Jesus said.
Right. Yeah.
Good. All right. His next kind of mini tactic here is what he calls these is sticks and stones. Yeah. Right. So
this is where you pick up the stone, and when the unbeliever says, "No, I don't believe in God," you throw it at him. Right. That's what we do.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Right. This is an ancient baseball. Right. They're throwing stones, and you're trying to hit it with a stick. No. Yeah, so he tells us that my mom used to say. So his mom used to tell him, "Sticks and stones may break your bones, but names will never hurt you." Right. So that's if you think about that, most moms would have said that, right?
I think that's on agreeing to start your own Twitter or YouTube page. That now remember,
sticks and stones. Right? He says it's a clever aphorism encouraging us to brush off foolish people, right, and ignore their empty insults and move on, and that's usually good advice. He tells us, right. And it's entirely accurate, though he says he says it's not entirely accurate, right? Why? Well, because first, names can hurt you. They can hurt you emotionally, right? So when we try to dismiss the slight, we can have that's an emotional hurt. So in a way, they can hurt you, right? And secondly, when it comes to thinking carefully about weighty matters, name calling can distract us, and it can be a nuisance, right? It gets us off course, right? And so it's not exactly accurate to say that they don't hurt. They can hurt you personally. They can hurt the conversation by getting us off course, right? Yeah. And so he says if we want to stay on target in an important discussion, we need to take action when these types of things happen.
And so I think the key there is if you want it to continue, because if someone's just going to name call and that's their big thing, is it really that much of a value to have a conversation with them?
Right. Yeah. He says, and so this taking action then is where the sticks and stone tactics comes in. Now, we don't pick up sticks and stones, right?
Oh, okay. Well, hold on.
He says this one is like the steamroller tactic that we saw earlier, right? This is a defensive tactic, right? It's a maneuver to protect you from a certain type of ad hominem attack, which is name calling, right? So that's what this one is all about. Here's how it works. Whenever anyone tries to deflect your point by labeling you with a nasty name, like bigot or homophobe or Islamophobe or racist or whatever, ask for a definition, right?
What do you mean by that?
Well, we've seen this before, right? Yeah. He says the rhetorical force of these words this name-calling words is often so powerful that you'll have a hard time overcoming them unless you flesh out their meanings and put them in the open. Right? Let's get our cards on the table. So what do you mean by that, right? Pejorative labels succeed at marginalizing you because of their ambiguity, right? Where they can have many meanings. And so we need to make sure that we nail something down with this person when they call us a name.
Right.
What do you mean by that? Or what is that to you? How are you using that word, right?
And we definitely see this with when we have conversations about, well, I don't agree with homosexual marriage because that's not how God set it up, and I'm a Christian, and therefore I go by what Christ's definition is. Well, you're just being a homophobe. Well, phobia is a fear of. I don't fear homosexuality. Yeah. So
what do you mean by homophobe?
Can you explain what that means? Just being against something. So are you a Christophobe by being fearful of Christians and speaking out against Islam? Does that make you an Islamophobe, or are you just being critical of a worldview or of a religion? Yeah, of a religion.
Yeah. Good. So So these labels can kind of marginalize you because they're ambiguous, and so you don't know where they're coming from. So we need to find out exactly what they're talking about, right? Plus, the person using them has definitely noticed this. Change the subject. So you were talking about one thing, and now they've changed the subject, right? From the issue at hand to a question of your character, right? Which is, quite frankly, irrelevant to the discussion, right? And so we shouldn't fall for this, sticks and stones or this name-calling type of thing, right? And so he says that there are two advantages of asking for a definition. First, it stops the momentum of the illicit attack and puts you back in the driver's seat, right? So, so wait. So what do you mean by that? Well, give me a definition of that particular term, right? And so now they have to stop, they have to think, and you're back in the driver's seat.
Hopefully.
Right? Yeah. And then secondly, it forces a person to think about what he just did, right?
Hopefully.
Yeah. Shame on them, actually, right? So once he spells out what he means, ask him why his definition applies to you. Why do you think that definition applies to me, right? And then ask why he thinks it's helpful to impinge your character instead of showing, where your idea went wrong. Right, that we're talking about this idea, and all of a sudden now, you're talking about me. Ridicule, obviously, is not an argument after all, and so your question could help take some of the edge off of the attack, right? So make sure that, again, when a person name calls, it's usually an act of hostility, and so we need to be sure that we're gracious and calm when we ask him for a definition, and then offer our follow-up questions like, your questions could help take some of the edge off the attack. So, what do you think made you? Why do you think I'm like that kind of thing, right? And what does that have to do with our discussion?
Right? We're talking about the transmission of the gospel. I don't know how it makes me an idiot. But, all right.
So he says most people don't realize that they've made a false move when they revert to personal smears. They've been so thoroughly socialized to use this approach that they don't realize that it's both intellectually unsound and it's also bad manners. Right? I mean,
it's very rude.
Yeah. And so you kind of nail them on it. You do it nicely. You get them to stop in their tracks. You get them to think about what they're doing. And you help them to see that, first of all, it's, okay, if you really think I'm like that, okay, that's fine. But what does that have to do with our discussion? Right. That's the thing that we need to get back to. Yeah. Right.
And two, this also applies to Christians. This is something that we need to look at, and we need to say, apply some sort of rule that may be golden to us, and say, is this how we want to be treated? Well, those heathen atheists are just, eating dirt, and they don't know, one way from up, and they're just a whole bunch of dummies, and they hate God, and so it drives them to pure madness, and just whatever mean things we can come up with. And so we need to realize that that's probably not the best thing to do in conversation. Right. Especially, hopefully, this person that you're conversating with, probably not online, and probably someone that you enjoy. And so sometimes that's just homophobic if you're against homosexual marriage. Well, are you saying that because you think I'm homophobic, or are you saying that because you've kind of heard that response from people that respond to people who talk about homosexual marriage? Yeah,
and then what do you mean by homophobic?
Right. So it could be a legitimate, I wasn't really thinking of what that meant. I've heard this in the past. Well, aren't you just being homophobic to gay people?
Oh, I wasn't saying you were homophobic, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Jesus was. So also a really good point for Christians to remember. Gentleness, meekness, love. That's what we want to bring. Right. When they go low, we go high.
So name calling, the sticks and stones, we say, hey, what's your definition? And we try, because really they've gotten off the subject. Right. And we need to steer them back. And so we halt them in their tracks by asking them, what do they mean by that? And then, tell them that, okay, that's fine, but that's not what we're talking about right now.
We're not politicians here. We're talking about important things.
Yeah.
So the next mini tactic he talks about is moving towards the objection.
Ooh, so moving towards the objection.
Yeah.
So like running towards it or running into it?
You know, sometimes it's the best. So sometimes it's better to move towards an objection rather than away from it, to embrace the charge rather than run from it. Don't evade, invade.
Oh, wow.
I like it. Embrace it, undermine its relevance, and take the wind out of its sails. In certain situations we face, that's good advice. And so this is an idea of, you're talking about something like, are there conflicts in the Bible? And so, you've watched this person debate before, or you know where they're coming from, and you can say, oh, I know he's going to say such and such person who is a Christian also agrees with my understanding that there are conflicts in the Bible. And so you can say, I know what my opponent's going to say here, and I don't hold to that same position, and so let me say that he's mistaken in these areas. And so you present kind of a positive case for why that view doesn't comport with what you're presenting. Yeah. And so you're kind of saying, now I know where you're going, and so let me cut it off at the knees here so that we can move on to something that I do believe, or something that's important, or trying to stay on track of certain things. So Martin Luther said this about the Romans. Well, wasn't he also anti-Jewish? No, I know what you're going to say is he was anti-Jewish, but that doesn't have any pro or con for what we're talking about here.
Right. So this one, you kind of agree with them because to a certain extent they may be right, but you show that their objection is irrelevant. Right. Right. That's the basic idea of this one.
Right. And so he says that I know Christians who are stumped when atheists charge, there are a lot of gods you don't believe in too. Zeus, Jupiter, Thor. We atheists just believe in one less god than you. And it turns out the atheist is exactly right on this point, but it does him no good. Okay. Sure.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
You're right. You do believe in one less God than I do. Okay, fine.
Believing in one less God than a monotheist is what distinguishes atheists from Christians.
Yeah, that's why I'm a Christian and you're an atheist.
Right. Yeah. A equals A. Nothing meaning follows from the observation. The flummoxed Christian could simply say, yes, you're right. You do believe in one less God than I do. That's what makes you an atheist and me a Christian. Yeah. We already know that. So what's your point? Then watch the challenge fizzle. And so he gives a lot of examples here. Yeah. And I was like, for my response to this one is, that's absolutely true. You believe in one less true answer than I do. It's just like 2 + 2 = 4. I don't believe all the other possible answers. I do believe it's 4. You just believe in one less answer than I do, right? Yeah. We can't have any ideas.
So he gives a number of these. The church is filled with hypocrites. Okay, let's move toward the objection, right? Actually, the church is filled with worse people than hypocrites, right? There's liars and swindlers and fornicators and adulterers, drunks and self-centered egoists and sinners of all sorts. That's why they need Jesus, right? So you move toward the objection. In other words, you agree with them and then show why the objection is irrelevant, right?
There are 130,000 words in the New Testament, but there are more than 400,000 variant readings, mistakes, differences, and errors. Wow. That's what Bart Ehrman writes. Yeah. Well, you know where Bart Ehrman got that number from? Dr. James White, who actually made him increase the number. But there's importance to variants, and there's whole studies on why variants are important. And in fact, the very reason that we can call them variants is because we know what the originals were. Yeah. And so the variance is a better attestation of where we got the Gospels, the New Testament writings, the Old Testament writings, than we have for, say, like the Quran. That ends itself at the Uthman revision, and we kind of don't really have anything past then. And so it's hard to talk about, well, what do we know was in the originals? And so these variants help us to understand that. That's great. Yeah. That's something that we should want to talk about. In fact, that helps our case. Right.
There's so much evil and suffering in the world. How can there be of God? right? So much evil and suffering. So let's move toward the objection. Of course, there's so much evil in the world, right? So we're moving toward the objection. We're agreeing with them, right?
We agree.
That's why you'd expect if the Christian account is true. The Bible doesn't just explain it, it predicts it. We live in a world humans broke, and a broken world produces broken people and broken situations. So we've moved toward the debate, and actually it's helped our cause, right? So we don't have to be afraid. Sometimes we can agree with what they're saying because it is true,
right?
And we can show it's irrelevant, and we can show how it helps our cause, right?
Yeah. Things like your God committed genocide when he destroyed the Canaanites, which I never understood why this was such a big thing, but I guess this is a Christians owned argument. Of course, God destroyed them. If you had witnessed the things they did, including burning thousands of children and even infants alive in sacrifice to Moloch, you would have asked, how could there be a God that allows these people to do such evil? It wasn't genocide, it was judgment.
Judgment, not genocide, right?
And so is God able to decree different forms of judgment? Yes, just like how he can send in sulfur and fire to burn up two cities. He can send his people, an army, to go and cleanse the land and make it a motif that points towards Jesus. Yeah, and so that's what a lot of the Old Testament is, and so that's what the New Testament writers also view. So a naysayer's objection is often meant to push us off balance and put us on the ropes.
Right.
In some cases, though, rather than go to the defensive, it's best to cast the negative as a positive. Tell them they're right, then show them it doesn't work in their favor the way they think it does. Help them see that their complaint is not ultimately relevant decisions or damaging when seen in the proper perspective. Right. And
wow, that's a good one.
What do you know? Yeah. Worldviews matter.
Yeah. So move toward move toward the objection, right? Move toward the objection. The next one is what he calls watch your language.
So don't curse at people, right?
That's right. Yeah, that sort of thing. That's not exactly what he's talking about, right? Yeah. He says much of our Christian lingo sounds like religious noise to outsiders. So what the idea here is we need to watch what we're saying in terms of our Christian lingo, right?
Or Christian-ese.
That's right. So worse, he says Christian jargon can be misleading. This is especially true of the word faith, for instance, right, which suggests a kind of useful fantasy, a leap of religious wishful thinking in complete disregard for reason or evidence.
Yeah, pretending to believe what you don't know.
That's right. And of course, he says nothing like this is in view with the original biblical word in
Pistis,
Greek. Pistis. Still it's the way many people mistakenly perceive what we're talking about when we use the word faith, right?
Definitely.
And so he says to solve this lingo problem, right, he says he makes it a habit of finding and using substitute words, synonyms for religious terminology to brighten our conversation and improve our communication.
Right. He's not lying. He's just taking the kind of almost the religious, I've heard this before, aspect away from it and saying, this is what I mean by this word.
Yeah, exactly.
Faith and science are opposed to each other. Confidence and science are opposed to each other? Or don't you have
trust?
Don't you have confidence in science? Isn't that a good thing?
Right. So instead of quoting the Bible or the Word of God, right? Both of them, he says, may be dismissed. Why not cite Jesus of Nazareth said this, right? If he's the one you're quoting. And that's exactly what's going on. You bring more precise and that sort of thing. When referring to the Gospels, try citing something like this: the ancient biblical evidence or the primary historical sources.
Which is what the Gospels are.
Yeah, right. For the life of Jesus of Nazareth. Say something like that. So that allows us now to speak in a way that the communication is meaningful and understood, right? Substitute trust, he says, for the exercise of faith. So not faith, but trust, right? I have placed my trust in Jesus. So, and really, that's a more precise meaning towards what the original had to say anyway, right?
I believe my wife is faithful. I trust her.
Right.
I mean, it's the same thing, especially when you're dealing with something like, can I save my own soul? No, probably not. In fact, I'd probably screw it up even worse than if I was just, made unaware of it. If someone told me, quick, save your soul, I'd probably fumble it really bad. And so
drop it, break it.
My trust is in Jesus. Just like how if you go skydiving and I probably butcher Tim McGrew's example in a debate where he says, if you go skydiving and the instructor packs your parachute, you have trust in him. You have faith that he packed it right because he's the guy that you're paying to do it.
Right.
And so your knowledge is of who he is, right? The parachute instructor, he's done this 6,000 times. He hasn't had one issue. He's packed it the same way. He's shown you how he packs it, and he takes you up in the plane. Now jump. The act of pulling the ripcord is an act of faith.
Wow,
an act of trust. I believe this, or jumping out of the plane, I guess.
Yeah,
and
both.
And knowing to pull it. Yeah, right.
So this, so we're to watch our language. We want the clearest and most compelling words that we can find to resolve difficulties and, to help us communicate.
I would
truth.
say, too, especially in this day and age when Christianity is dying, whatever that means, people aren't exposed to these types of language anymore.
Yeah.
And they might have misconstrued it. They've only gotten every sitcom has the terrible Christian who has an abortion at the drop of a hat and doesn't really believe in God or wants it really to be true. And so that's the type of kind of presuppositions they're bringing in, and you have to dispel it. When I say faith here, I mean
clear it
trust.
up. Yeah.
Especially if people are writing books saying this is what Christians really mean when they say faith. Don't let them get away with it. Okay. One of my favorites, the power of so.
Okay, so this is the last one, right?
Yeah. I like okay. Just okay. You have a point. I'm glad you made that. You get the last word. Okay, that's fine. So the power of so. So many challenges offered by skeptics amount to little more than intellectual trash talk. These are clever sounding complaints that have rhetorical impact and effectively intimidate the opposition, but have nothing to do with any reasonable case against God or Christianity. Here's where a bit of reflective thinking coupled with a simple tactic can be golden and just kind of take the level down. Again, we're not trying to make the person mad, but by responding to their claim of, you're just an idiot. You don't know what you're talking about. I wish when you're dead and gone, then it'll be a lot less child abuse in the world.
Wow. Yeah.
Okay. So
that means my point isn't true,
right.
or it is, or what? How does that affect my point?
Right. So he says, I want to teach you the tactical power of a humble 2-letter word. The modest word is a little giant, putting the ball back in the skeptic's court and putting you in the driver's seat. When used properly, it can stop a challenger in his tracks, turn the tables, and get him thinking. The little word used the question is, so? Yeah. Okay. It's not uncommon to hear the dismissive, Christians are stupid from critics. My response is, you're right. Some of them are. So?
Right. What does that have to do with the truth of Christianity?
Right.
Yeah.
Here's another one. Christians are hypocrites. My response is, yep, some of them are. In fact, I would say most of them are. In fact, I probably am within the scope of an hour. You got me. I admit it. So? Churchgoers have all sorts of vices, but this tells you nothing about Christ. I like your Christ, but I don't know about your Christians. Give us time. We're working towards it.
That's right.
God is working in us, I should say. We're not working towards it.
That's right.
Here's a final example, one that he's heard frequently. You're a Christian because you were raised in America. If you were raised in Iraq, you'd be a Muslim. My answer is probably so. And you can do this with them, too. Yeah. The reason that you're an atheist is because you're living at this day and age. You wouldn't be an atheist if you lived 500 years ago, or you'd be a slave owner if you were in the times. Oh, no, I would be an abolitionist. Well, when the abolitionists were torched and murdered and killed, and less than probably 2% of the population were abolitionists before the Civil War, you're one of those 2%. Oh man, I wish I could have the convictions over time that you could. So even if true, what does that tell you about the merits of Christianity versus Islam?
Right.
Nothing.
Right.
What does that tell you about the merits of theism versus atheism? Nothing. And also, this doesn't account for people that come out of those worldviews. In fact, atheists themselves come out of Christian families. Does that mean that that doesn't account for anything within that person's story about removing themselves from a Christian family of Christian upbringing?
Right.
No, that doesn't mean anything about the validity of atheism or the positive aspects for Christianity.
Right. So what they're really trying to say is, well, your social environment affects what you believe.
Nurture and nature.
Well, that may be true, but the question is the belief true?
Right.
Right. So, we're not going to look at the source. That's called the genetic fallacy, right? No, we want to look at the belief itself, regardless of what our social environment, how that might affect us, right? That's really what they're trying to say. And he's saying, that's true, but what does that have to do with the belief?
Right.
Right.
Right. This may be an interesting observation about culture or anthropology, but it tells nothing about the truth or error of the specific religious claim. Right. So the power of so. These attempts are nothing more than genetic fallacies or ad hominems, all irrational missteps, not thoughtful responses. Anyone advancing such an appeal is being unreasonable. And so kind of just takes it for what it is. Mm-hmm. And so if they want to leave the conversation from there as a winner, let them. You're not there to hold people down and waterboard them into the gospel. You're there to present the gospel, and if no one wants to listen, that's up to them. So listen carefully to a challenge, then ask yourself what follows, even if the claim is accurate. If there's nothing that you're aware of, point out using this tactic and see what happens. Right. What do you think?
So these many tactics, he says, are modest, uncomplicated maneuvers that you can easily put into play when needed to help you in conversations with other people.
Right.
Right. And so that's the basic idea of what he's trying to do here. So he's given us these 5, and he's saying these can help us in these various situations.
Right. From there, we're moving to the last chapter. So hopefully you've enjoyed this book. That's it for the tactical portion. So now we do the summary, and we'll do that next episode because there is good challenges that he has in chapter 19. Yeah. More sweat, less blood.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Ooh, wow.
So
it's going to get messy.
Yeah. We're going to need a corner man in this one. So hopefully you've enjoyed this. Thanks for walking through it with us, and join us next time when we close the book and we'll figure out what to do next.
Yeah.
So thanks.
Yep. See you next time.